5, and we have 61 people that have joined us. So you think we should get started, guys?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It's almost my age.
First, let me just say welcome. I mean, this is really unbelievable. I mean, if anything, there's still so much hope out there. This is the biggest participation we had. One time when Reverend Caldwell was with us, we had 67 people participate. But as we were talking earlier, when some of the first folks joined us, we have over 100 people and that was our capacity for tonight, that registered for this program. So it's like with great pride, because we think that, you know, we started this discussion, certainly not when we should have, but 5 years ago in 2015, we had a librarian who had been here for many, many years with the Red Bank Library retire. And I was really lucky to become in charge of the adult programming. And we were able to develop Let's Talk About Race. I don't know if she's here with us, but in the very beginning, I was able to hire Gilda Rogers, who's a great educator and activist and so many wonderful things. She is like the leading spirit of the T. Thomas Fortune House, which is a great place in Red Bank to visit and become a part of. But anyway, she kicked off our series, and we had Sid Bernstein with us, and we really got to talk to the community and see what the community needed, because the Red Bank community is a really diverse community. It's different from a lot of Monmouth County communities. So it was a great place to launch this program. And from that time on, we've really had a lot of interest. And it was a place where people could talk honestly. It was a place where you were educated, but you also left there feeling amazed that a lot of the things that you learned in this program, at least for me, I had never learned in school, and things that, you know, were being done as far as prisons. And I mean, we ran the gamut of conversations. We had actually a document that was printed that had all the different conversations we had, which ranged from racial disparities in healthcare and women in the workforce and environmental racism, gender equality, fair housing, immigration policies, writers of color. We did films. We talked about Black fraternities and sororities and voting rights and equal education and equal housing. And I mean, we really have run the gamut. And in the very beginning, Citizens for a Diverse Society was just starting. And we got to see what they were doing, and we got to talk to Pastor Porter at Pilgrim Baptist Church and the NAACP. And so we really immersed ourselves in the community to see what should we do to better the Red Bank community. So in 5 years, I think we've made some progress, but as we can see from things happening today, we have such a long way to go. So we're really proud tonight to have a program where we can all share together remotely and talk honestly. Everyone will be muted, as Kerwin said, and after I finish talking, if you could turn your screen off so you'll just see the panelists, that would be great. Other than this program, I just want to do a little update for the library. The library is really excited. On July the 6th, we're opening for curbside pickup. So you can call us, you can email us, and you can let us know. Only 5 items, I'm sorry, but 5 items at a time. It's just our collection. Unfortunately, we can't, you know, we don't have any in transit deliveries being made. So anything you want has to be from our collection. We're going to try really hard to keep up with what you need and do the best we can. I mean, this is all uncharted territory. So we're excited about being able to offer some of our items and see you at the same time, but we need to safely distance. So check it out on our website. Also, we're doing all kinds of remote programming. Our children's program has become a star. I mean, she was a star before, but now I think they're vying for TV rights for her. I mean, she is unbelievable. She's presenting, story times, and she's now doing actually a racial conversation for young children on Saturday mornings. We also have another program with our Barbara Piquel, who's a reference librarian, who's looking to attract teens to be part of a program, Let's Talk About Change, which is not just dealing with racial disparities, but dealing with all the mess that the poor young people have to deal with in moving forward. So we're looking for young people, Suvi, if you can help us in that endeavor, or anybody can help us, please send them our way, okay? Anyway, I don't want to take up all the time about the library and about the program, but we're really, really happy that you've all joined us tonight, and we look forward to a great program. So with that, Patty?
I think we're turning it over to Diem right now to introduce the panelists.
Okay. Good evening. I'm just honored to be here tonight to introduce this panel of community members who, our committee came together and thought, let's get some voices who have a community of them to themselves, whether it is their friends, whether it is their congregations, whether it is their colleagues. And let's really see, because these are leaders. Every one of our panelists tonight, all four of them are leaders of their own communities and micro communities. So our curiosity is, what are you all discussing in your communities? What are your conversations for our times? As we all know, these are some times, but you know what? We're all going to be here, and we all have more in common than we do different. So that said and done, I'm going to introduce our panelists. It's just thrilling to see this group together. Our first panelist will be Subi Mondesir. Subi is a student at Fairleigh Dickinson University, entering her junior year in September. She's a double major in both government and law, as well as communications, with a concentration on journalism. You know she's busy. She currently serves as the social media publicist for the T. Thomas Fortune Cultural Center in Red Bank, and heads their Fortune Tellers program for grades 8 and up. Our second panelist tonight is Reverend Marcia Grayson. She's a retired correction officer after 25 years with the Monmouth County Correctional Facility. But after Reverend Grayson's retirement, she earned a Doctorate of Ministry from the New Brunswick Theological Seminary in 2019 with a dissertation entitled Using Transformational Preaching to Bring Awareness and Break the Silence in Congregations Regarding Sexual and Physical Abuse Against Women. Our third panelist tonight is Minister Kerwin Webb. Minister Webb serves as the president of the Greater Red Bank Area NAACP. Minister Webb is also the education specialist at Interfaith Neighbors and works to develop educational programs for youth and young adults. Reverend Webb earned a Master of Divinity degree from Princeton Theological Seminary and has working relationships with organizations including the Equal Justice Initiative and the Center for Public Justice. And our last panelist is Reverend Rabbi Klein. Rabbi Klein is rabbi of the Monmouth Reform Temple in Tinton Falls, New Jersey. He also serves on boards and commissions dedicated to social services and social justice on a local, regional, and international level. His motto, justice is just never just us. Wow. We are just, it's exciting to have these voices together tonight. So I'd like to go to each panelist. You have about 5 to 10 minutes maximum to talk a little bit about the conversation of our times from your perspective. Once again, it's the conversation you're having with your colleagues, with your community members. And Subi, why don't you bring us up to speed on the conversation for our times in your community? And first also identify what your community is that you're reporting on.
All right, so hi everyone. As Diem said, that my name is Subi Mondesir and I'm representing the youth and that youth perspective. I really wanted to touch on the current events and how they have impacted the lives of young people first, and then kind of talk about how historical aspects are really paralleling what we're seeing today. So I think that the first major difference with what's going on today is that protests are more than just a trend. They're actually being enacted. They're actually creating changes that we want to see, whether that is legally, whether that is within our own communities, and just really creating a conversation and more of a safe place to be able to have these conversations openly and honestly, which I think is really important in order to combat these racial tensions that we're seeing today. I also see more people having the courage to come forward and talk about their own experiences regarding racism and exposing racism, being more proactive, not being silent and taking a step back, but really wanting to be part of change, really wanting to make a difference and voicing those who have been silenced for a very long time. And young people especially have been fighting bravely for these racial issues, even during a pandemic. We're going out there with our signs, masks, we're marching, and we're really showing that this is something that our generation is really hoping to be able to change and flip the script on. And I want to talk about some historical issues as they relate to what we're seeing today. I think a lot of people think that young people aren't aware of history, or we're not respecting our elders and how they have come before us and really paved the way for us to be able to move forward to where we are today. And I just want to speak to that for a little bit. So as young people, I think that we have become more aware of historical issues and how that parallels what we've seen in the past. For example, the Central Park Five, we all saw the When They See Us documentary on Netflix by Ava DuVernay, and how Amy Cooper and that whole situation is really paralleling the Central Park Five. So when you can take that history, apply it to today, you can see the ways that it's important to not repeat that history, not repeat that dialogue that we're having. It also shows how white people are weaponizing their white privilege for their own personal benefit and gain. And I think that's why it's so important for us to know our history so that we don't repeat it. Some other key points that I want to bring up is Tulsa, Oklahoma, also known as Black Wall Street, where it was a self-sufficient Black-owned area. And there was a lot of injustice in that scenario, because here it is that African Americans were trying to raise ourselves, we're trying to move forward to become self-sufficient, and yet we're still being held back. I also want to touch on Rosewood, that massacre, and how that racially motivated massacre of Black people and the destruction of Blacktown in 1923. So what I'm bringing these points up is to show that, you know, Black people were more than just slaves. We were inventors, we were entrepreneurs, we were business owners, and knowing that history is going to be really important in motivating us to become better in our present day and to make the changes that we want to see. And knowing your history is really key in feeling empowered and being educated and knowing how to move forward. I also want to quickly touch on this idea of what patriotism is and what it means to be American. I feel as though a lot of people believe like, oh, Americans, like African Americans weren't fighting in these wars. They're not American. They have no idea what it means to be an American. But I want to point out that the first man to die for this country was a Black man, Crispus Attucks, and he died during the Revolutionary War and the Boston Massacre. So fighting for this country is not a white thing, because Black people were doing it when we weren't even considered human, much less a citizen. The Tuskegee Airmen were Black military units that fought in World War II. So knowing this and teaching this to young people, I think, is going to be really key and really important, because it's hard to dream and to visualize and see who you want to be in this world when there's not equal representation. And that also goes with the scenes that we see in Hollywood and the entertainment industry. As a Black girl growing up, I didn't see a lot of people who looked like me on screen in roles and playing roles of lawyers and doctors and all these other things that white characters were portraying. So I think that representation is really key for young people in order to visualize and see who we can become in this world. And I want to end by saying that the conversation between older people and younger people, I think, has to become more of an us than a they and a us versus them, because we need to be able to work together. We need to be able to communicate and come together, because we're all fighting the same battles. We're all trying to combat racism. We're all trying to combat prejudices and stereotypes that have been the fabric of the nation. And I think that by coming together rather than saying, oh, young people are doing it, so this is how we did it, and not really having that conversation is going to be more of a hindrance to how we're trying to come together as one. So for the young people, I would say, you know, understand that the people that came before us were really paving this way, and we wouldn't be where we are without their sacrifices, without their movements and their change in their days. And then for the older generations, I would say to try to understand and converse with young people. I know that we might be doing things a little bit differently than how you had done it in your day, but if we join forces and come together, I think that will be really a great mark for changing what we want to see in this world for the better, and to be more proactive in creating that conversation and just bringing everyone together and really becoming the United States of America. So that's my take on that, and that's what I wanted to speak to for the youth perspective.
I'm ready to applaud. I'm going to ask you, are you running for president?
Maybe, we'll see. Well,
thank you so much. I'd like to hear from Reverend Grayson. Could you share your conversation for our times in your community? Once again, to identify the community that you're speaking to represent, and it's your turn.
Thank you.
Yes.
First of all, Subi, you got my vote, girl. I am so very, very proud of you. As you said, I'm Reverend Dr. Marcia Grayson, and I come in a twofold, especially during this time of racial disparity, the police, and so forth and so on. And as you mentioned in my, as you mentioned in the introduction, that I'm a former correctional officer where I retired after 25 years. And with everything that's going on, and I come, I guess you could say I come from a different place. And I have to say that based on for everything that Subi had said, I'm truly just not impressed, but I'm grateful, because when I grew up in a predominantly white area and a predominantly white school, and all of those, I did not know my history, nor did I know my people, nor did I know our history books back then only represented the fact that we were slaves. And I remember taking a stand and having a problem with the fact that, and I said, I'm not dealing with these. One of my classmates, and this is all back in 7th grade, she was 7th, 8th grade. She was like, I said, I'm not reading this, I'm not doing this, and I'm not doing this because I know that I'm more than this. And so with that, I am just so grateful for all of that, and now for the opportunity and the fact that I agree that we have to have this history. Now, on the flip side of the coin, where I don't want you to think that I'm taking up for law enforcement, but being prior law enforcement, there are some things that I do happen to know. And one of the things about it that keeps coming up in the conversation is the training. And they need to stop being trained to shoot to kill. And I mentioned before that where law enforcement is not trained to shoot to kill, we're trained to shoot to stop. And then they're like, well, that means to kill. Not necessarily. It's all in this area. We're not trained to shoot to headshots and so forth and so on. But on the flip side of the coin, who's telling the quote unquote civilian bad guys? And the reason why I said for civilian bad guys is because there are some law enforcement bad guys as well, which we have definitely become to notice. But who's telling the civilian bad guys, don't use those bullets that penetrate vests, don't shoot at the cops in the head, don't come towards them in this type of aggressive way? So rightfully so, in law enforcement, having to learn how to self-defend themselves, as well as be the public servants that they're supposed to be, and that we are hired to be, we have to learn also how to be able to defend ourselves so that we can help to defend the public. Yes, it has been twisted and has been torn, and we talk about changing the manner of the training academy and teaching them racial sensitivity and so forth and so on. One thing that I have learned, and being on the blue side, as well as
answer and then hang up.
as well as the side that I'm always in, which is the black side, I have experienced blue turn against me as well. But the thing about it, it wasn't all blue. It was those who had rightfully chosen. And there are those law enforcement officers that I would say the law enforcement bad guys that have made a conscious decision and a conscious choice to do the things that they have done, to violate. And those are some things that we cannot teach and we cannot train. And for lack of a better word, you can't take the punk out of an officer no matter how much you train them. If they're scared, they're going to be scared, no matter what. And yes, you sometimes have those that been picked on as little kids, and then they decide to grow up and be a cop so they can carry a gun and take out on everybody else that didn't treat them right. For the little black kid that ragged on them in school, or the one who, or the black boy that was fly and all of that, and took their little girlfriend and so forth and so on. And then they come up with these different hatreds and the stuff that they are raised with. You can't take that out of them. But as some of the discussions that have come up, that when you begin to screen them and begin to process them, there are some intimate questions that we have to know. For instance, when we go into law enforcement, we have to take a psych exam. And just in case y'all wondering, yes, I did pass all of them. Amen. However, if you've ever had to take the psych exam for anything, they ask you in 90 different ways, okay, because the questions are like 500 and something else questions or whatever, but they ask you so many different ways. Do you like your mother? Do you like your father? Do you hate your mother? Do you hate your... They ask you all of those questions, and they turn the question around and they ask you the same thing. You think to yourself, well, maybe I forgot to hit the button and I'm on the same page, because they ask it so frequently. But the problem is they're not asking, or they're not able to do the racial identity, the racial profiling, and so forth and so on, while the person is taking the test to find out, how did you grow up? What is your thought process? And whether or not you are able to, one of the things is, do you really, and another question they ask you, do you like yourself? Many people don't know they don't like themselves. They don't know it. So they just answer the question and it's been described. And then they don't want anybody to know that they don't. Because self-hatred, low self-esteem are mainly the reasons and concerns for why we do the negative things against other people that we do. One time before, I mentioned that, and I'm partial to corrections because, like I said, I worked there for 25 years, and I can say, and I boldly brag on the fact that I like the training that we get at the Monmouth County Correctional Facility, the police academy, as well as at the jail. We have in-service training all the time. However, some of the training for saving money has been changed to a computer, to where you answer the questions, you skim through, you answer it, you keep it going, you move it. The problem is some of these trainings need to be one-on-one and hands-on, because you don't know, you can't talk to, I can talk to y'all any kind of way that I want to because I'm on the other side of this screen. But when it comes time for a confrontation, and this is one great thing about corrections officers, not that we always get it right, but we get it, but we know how to do it, and we are trained to do it well. Because there is a response time before backup comes, and we do not have any type of weapons with us. We have cap spray. I've been gone 5 years, can't remember the name of the stuff. But we have that spray, that pepper spray. We have that. So, but that can only go so far, and you got to be quick draw to get it out of the case and everything else before something happens. So, not to belittle us, so you need to be able to talk your way out of a situation. You need to be able to talk a situation down and calm it. And when you are one officer watching 66 inmates at the same time, stuff happens on the rise, you got one officer that might be next door for your break person to be able to come in the event of an issue, and then you got to wait for the rest of the people to be able to get in to the section to be able to help you. In all of that time, we still have not drawn a weapon. We still have had to know how to use our interpersonal communication skills to be able to de-escalate a situation the best that we can. And that's one thing that I believe, and I feel that many of these negative and these bad officers, these bad seeds, are not able to do. Because, and I think it was in the movie The Hate U Give, or either some research, one of the things I was doing, somebody will know where I got it from, when it says that it's hard to fight the system when what they are afraid of is the blackness of, is the color of your skin. I can't change the color of my skin. What can we do better to make others understand that it's not the color of the skin as how you should determine how you will stop someone, how you arrest someone, how you will talk to people. And that's another problem, that white officers in their, as Subi put it in their, using their white privilege when they come and they speak to us and approach, especially a black male, degradingly, it becomes automatic, you get defensive. So being able to talk to one another, being able to understand and being able to see that past the skin. Because why do you fear the color of my skin? But yet your same color is taking you out and taking you by surprise, because you didn't approach them case by case and according by the attitude. You approached them because of the like, in that nice manner, because of the likeness of their skin, of your skin, and the likeness between the two. And they turned around themselves and then murdered you. But we don't see those stories hitting the news. But I know that they are true. And I know that they are there because I have experienced them in so many, I've seen. So from both sides of the fence, every cop is not bad.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And every perpetrator per se is not bad either. It's a matter of respect. And it's a matter of knowing how to talk to someone and learning how to de-escalate the situation. Send all the police officers to the county jail to work for 4 weeks so that they know what it's like to work in a place, in a facility where your gun is not firsthand. There is no taser available. There's no gun available. The only thing you got is to be able to speak, or you're gonna have to know how to fight until backup comes. But yet, the lives are not taken.
Well, thank you for sharing your perspective and sprinkling that bit of humanity on this situation, because, you know, sometimes from the outside, humanity is what gets left out. We get the headline, we get the splash, we get the right, the wrong, but there's a whole lot in between. So thank you for bringing that forward. Our next panelist, Minister Webb, would you like to come forward and share your, you know, what's your community? What are they talking about? The conversations of our times from your community. Please identify the community in which you represent. And Minister Webb, bring it on.
So good evening, everyone. My name is Kerwin Webb, and answering which community I represent is difficult. I represent many. So I am the president of the Greater Red Bank Area NAACP. So to a certain degree, I represent the civil rights community. I'm the associate pastor of youth and young adults at Second Baptist Church of Asbury Park. And so I represent that community as well. But also I'm an educated Black man who has been fortunate to travel the world and to see some things and to know some things, and have been called, commissioned, and equipped by God to speak about some things. So in short, I have those three communities: the church, the NAACP civil rights activists, but then just the world community. But I'm speaking to anybody and everybody who's listening, because this is a message for everybody. The conversations that we're having are the conversations of our time. They are of police violence and state-sanctioned genocide. They are of climate destruction and absolute planetary destruction. They are conversations about corruption in government and a broken fixture of what a democracy, constitutional republic, however you define it, is supposed to be. So I'm talking to a broken world, right? There are those people who are faith-based, religious, believe in a higher power. I'm speaking to you too. Because we all have responsibilities. We've all been called and commissioned to impact the areas that we inhabit. So the conversations that I'm having with people like Sue, and I'm so glad that she's here. People like Marcia Grayson, I'm so glad that she's here. People like Mark Klein and people at the library. The conversations I'm having are, what are we doing about it, right? And the it, you can fill in any one of those things. You can talk about climate change. You can talk about voting rights. You can talk about poverty. You can talk about homelessness. You can talk about state-sponsored violence. You can talk about all of that. But you can also talk about ignorance and apathy and hopelessness and Black institutions that tear themselves down because of ego and hubris and arrogance and all of that. We can throw all of this stuff on the table, because all of it is valid. And the question still is, what do you do about it? How do you impact it? Those who are close to me, those who know me, they understand my trepidation and my angst about actually living into this calling that God has given me. God has called me to do some things that I don't want to do. And they are not bad things, but they are things that I know are going to be difficult, right? They're calling people to account for their actions and inactions, for their oppressions and their dismissals, for their arrogance and their stupidity and all of it. Conversations I'm having, though, is that in the midst of all this chaos and darkness and hatred, there is hope. I see rays of hope in programs like this, where over 100 people and over 70 people showed up just to say, hey, let's see, how can we do something? I see the hope when people connect with me at the Red Bank NAACP and say, I just want to help. I don't know how, I just want to do something. I see the hope when I hear the tough conversations from Suvi Mondesir and all of those other young people that she was on a panel with last week, when she looks at me and say, why the hell are y'all allowing it to happen? And she's calling us to question, right? The conversations that we're having is that we are at a flashpoint in history. We are at a moment in time that historians will write about, and your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, they will be looking through the record books to see what you did and which side you were on. It is no longer acceptable to just be a bystander. Mm-hmm. That's out of the window. If you are not actively doing something to fix the problems of the world, you are the problem. And I have no allegiance with you. But if you want to help, don't know how to help, are just flabbergasted about all of it, I'm okay with that. I can work with you as long as you're ready and willing to put your shoulder to the plow. So I'm talking to all the civil rights activists. I'm talking to all the organizational leaders. I'm talking to all the church leaders. I'm talking to anybody who's anybody, politician and otherwise. Get on the right side, because the world is watching. The world will judge you, and the steamroller of justice is coming your way. So just don't get rolled over.
Wow. Thank you. And from the Amen Corner, thank you very much. I think everyone here has come forward with something I would certainly say amen to. And so we're going to keep building this pyramid tonight, this conversation of our times. I'd like to hear from Rabbi Klein to Rabbi Klein, please tell us about the conversations of our times from your perspective, and which of your many communities that you think you're the principal voice for in this conversation.
Well, I'd like to be able to say first, amen to everything, and Kerwin said it. He said it all, because I'll give the props that he knows he's going to hate me for, but you're looking at the future leader of this community in his voice, and I love learning with him. I'm Mark Klein. I'm the rabbi at Monmouth Reformed Temple. I serve in a host of capacities. I'm on a refugee board with the Vatican, so I'm speaking to people, I think, primarily who need to understand there's a bigger picture. It's about education, and a lot of people are screaming rhetoric that it comes out of nowhere. The Emancipation Proclamation didn't end slavery in America. The Emancipation Proclamation ended slavery in the states loyal to the Confederacy. And Juneteenth was not the end of slavery in America, it was the end of slavery in the Confederacy. But at the same time that that's happening, Kentucky and Missouri, Delaware, and Maryland were still legal slave states. They just happened to be in the North. And, I point out every time I can that New Jersey voted not to ratify the 13th Amendment. And so while the North prides itself on being anti-racist and anti-slavery, it took the ratification of the 13th Amendment to force it on the North. When you change law, you don't change hearts. And when the fact that we've got, gazillion civil rights laws on the books doesn't mean that people understand, agree, or empathize. I'm a recovering lawyer, and I did civil rights law in Arkansas. And I can tell you that I don't remember ever winning a case where the defense went back to their boardroom and said, "Thank you, God, for Mark enlightening us to the error in our ways." They were upset that they got caught. And that's the way we do things. We want to put Band-Aids on situations. We want to make it look nice, but we don't want to clean the wound. We don't want to admit that we've got atonement to do. We don't want to understand beyond our own myopia. And the number of times I hear white people say, "Well, I work with Black people and they don't complain to me while we're at work," as if that means that there's no race problems because they're not spending the entire day complaining and bitching. Their ears hear what their mouth is saying. So I look at the problem as being one of, in Hebrew, the word tzedakah gets mistranslated often. We usually translate it as charity, but charity is sympathy. And really it means righteousness, which is empathy. You got a solution. And we have done a great job in white America sympathizing with poor Black communities. And there was a mega church in Louisville, Kentucky, in response to George Floyd's murder, who said, "We've got to start sending more food to the food pantry because those poor Black people are starving to death." Are you kidding me? And so there's some real myopia that we've got to get past, and we've got to get to a place where we're willing to understand that you can't fix if there's a hole under your seat in the rowboat, I'm going down with you. So there's no such thing as an us versus them. And I think Subi said it amazingly well. We spend our time in not just old versus young, but in the different camps, creating separation between us. And the power base thrives on this separation. When Dr. King was assassinated and Rabbi Heschel, Abraham Joshua Heschel, when he passed away in 1972, the system drove the Jewish and Black community apart to the point that most Jews and most Black America today don't even realize how intimately involved the Jews were in the civil rights movement. Because it's not part of the history that we know. And, as Jews who are white got to participate in the meritocracy. It's also in the time of the 70s that we started being admitted to the country clubs. And you know, there was a time you had to belong to a synagogue because it was the only social life you were allowed. But when we became part of the meritocracy, our ox wasn't being gored anymore. And so empathy went out the window. Most people don't understand that. So, you know, I can tell you that education is, on any of these fronts, the most important piece. And it's got to start really young. My daughter in Louisville, Corey, is 34, and my grandson is 3, and Corey has been taking Jacob to protest marches. And it's kind of funny because I called them on FaceTime the other night, and Jacob had to tell me his new line: no Justin, no peace. So you're starting them really young, you know? But even at 3-year-old, he's asking important questions about why people are treated differently, because he could see in the marches how that was happening. So I think, you know, when you talk about who we're talking to, we're trying to talk across the board, because, you know, when you say you're speaking to the choir, everyone has to realize the choir needs to be spoken to. My people think that we have empathy. Black America thinks it has empathy. Hispanic America thinks it has empathy. And it's great, but you can only empathize with what you know. And beyond what you know, you don't understand well enough to feel for. So that's really where I'm struggling, is helping people to figure out what really is going on, where power insists on separating us so that it can maintain itself, and how the political parties that exist in America are broken, both broken. The system is broken. It's about power, not representation. And, you know, think about, we're asked to support people for political office who want to have control over constituency. When we get to the President of the United States, we want to help someone become the most powerful person in the world, and knowing that that person is never going to be accountable to us who elected that person. So it's got grassroots change. It doesn't start from the lawmakers down. It's got to start from these conversations, growing understanding, growing empathy, and then growing a sense of real kinship with each other. And that's really uncomfortable. No one wants to have to admit that they don't know. And no one wants to admit that they're on the wrong side of history. And yet, it's going to take all of that to clean out the wound before we start wanting to put Band-Aids on it.
Wow. Whew, what an image that was. All of that to clean out the wound, so we don't put more Band-Aids on it. I think that your point of getting down to the core. And, you know, I'd like to thank you all for bringing that forward. What is the core of the conversation in your communities? Fantastic beginning. Amen to all 4. Thank you for joining the Amen group, Reverend Rabbi Klein. I almost shifted you there, Rabbi.
I'll answer to anything.
Okay. All right. So what we'd like to do now is to take some questions from the floor. I think you can enter questions in the chat. If you all know where the chat is on your screen. On all platforms, if you move your mouse or your pointer down to near the bottom of the screen, one of the icons towards the right that shows up says chat. And you can enter a question there, and the team will bring it forward, and we will have a dialogue here, so that this is not 4 panelists speaking to you. This is a dialogue. This is a two-way street, and that's what builds communities. That's what's going to get us open with the creation of the bridges necessary, so we can be here for Subi's generation to have something to lead. We've got to figure this out, y'all. So how are we doing, Patty? And have questions have come in yet?
I don't see any questions yet, but people can also raise their hands. I don't know, we could do both things. If you click on the bottom where it says participants, and if you click on that, you'll see an icon that says raise hand. And then the host can unmute you, and you can speak your question. So
Okay.
yeah, we would love to hear what you would like to learn more from our panelists.
Patty, if I can just, I got a question privately that I'd like to respond. The question was, of course, Jews weren't lynched in America. No, and we can talk about Nazi Germany, but the problem is that is, for Jews, ancient history, and being able to participate in the meritocracy of America, that's almost an irrelevant part of history. And so while a lot of Jews will scream anti-Semitism, we know racism because of anti-Semitism. First of all, anti-Semitism isn't race. But the reality is Jews don't know from that experience. We know from faith that we have to do this work. But I think one person was sharing with me that the last time they heard a Jew say, I was a slave in Egypt. Of course I understand slavery. You know, the absurdity of that concept. So we really do need to grow our understanding and get uncomfortable and admit that there's a whole piece of this package that you can't possibly know if you haven't walked in those shoes. That doesn't mean we can't learn, but it shouldn't take Black America to tell white America, hey, you have to learn to be human. We should be able to learn how to be human without being taught how to be human.
Mm. Amen.
Thank you. And I think that speaks exactly to your emphasis on the importance of empathy. It's not who suffered more, it's empathizing with everyone's story. We do have a question from, I'm sorry, where is it? Reverend Jacqueline Carr, I can't read the rest of your name, I'm sorry. To all the excellent panelists, how do we stop the myopia of divide and conquer? Do you want to, Kerwin, do you want to unmute her so she can read her question?
Yes, give me a second. I will try to find her.
Reverend Jacqueline Carr.
She's on the second group, the top to the right.
Reverend Jackie, unmute yourself.
She's still muted.
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Yep.
And in your camera.
Go ahead, Reverend Jackie. Reverend Jackie?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you hear me? I just want to know, and all of you, thank you. You were very, very excellent. As I said, the question is to all of you. I would like to know, how do we stop the myopia, the short-sightedness of just seeing perspectives from our own issues? How do we stop dividing and conquer so that we do not implode from within? Subi, I really liked what you said. We do have to talk. We have to interact from generation to generation. How do we do that? Reverend Dr. Marcia, I like what you did by giving us the perspective from the other side of the blue line. How do we, and I've been on protests also, and back in the 70s, the same thing. How do we learn from history so that we don't implode?
Mm-hmm. Does anyone have something they'd like to say to that?
It's really just as simple as having conversation. It's really just as simple as being humble enough to come off of our high horse when we're talking to other people and learn from them. But it's also coming outside of where we are used to. And so the thing for us as adults, we are going to have to make sure that we are intentional about creating those opportunities and spaces for our children. They can't do it themselves. And by the time they're adults, if they've been socialized only with one race, they're probably not going to naturally gravitate towards the other. So we have to figure out a way to we need to learn how children would interact. Watch 2-year-olds. They don't care about race. See how they interact, and then we need to model that, because anything less is going to continue to be this. But we have to also understand that it's a trick of the enemy and those in power to keep us divided and conquering. So if we continue to be simple-minded enough to fall for it, then shame on us. But we have to know that that's a tactic that's out there.
Yeah.
Amen, brother.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
All right.
Anyone else?
Marcia, I think, needs to be unmuted.
Yes, and then we have a question from Galaxy J3 Ariane, who raised their hand.
Okay.
Go ahead, Reverend Grayson.
Okay.
You can see the raised hands.
One of the things is I was thinking about is the fact that what you were saying as far as being able to have the conversation. Yes, conversation is important, but one thing about the conversation, about having a conversation, is being able to come to the table without your own agenda. Being able to come to the table and being prepared to listen as more than being heard. So when we come to the table, and even though we have our own biases, but our own biases are not the agenda, our own bias is not the forefront. When we come together and we're able to sit down at the table, then we need to be able to sit with one another and realize at that particular time, at this table, if everyone is equal. And the problem, truthfully speaking, coming from experience and from who I am, you know, in law enforcement, a lot of times when we come to the table with the authority that has been given and rightly into us. So therefore, we automatically think that we're here, we need to be respected, and so forth and so on. At that time, all guards need to be put down, because without the fact of being able to come equally, being able to hear equally, being able to speak equally, being able to be heard equally, even with the same amount of passion, we still have to be able to come without that bias, without that prejudice, and without that superiority complex that we have. If not, then sitting at the table becomes mute. So in my opinion, that's how we have to get through that myopia. We have to open up our minds. We have to open up our minds from our own selfish thinking.
You know, you can't solve a problem when you start with the answer, because we don't know enough. You know, Gil Caldwell, God bless this man, you know, says on a regular basis that if you really want to figure out how to grow, you have to start by being faithful enough to admit that you don't know. And that's where the listening begins. And if you come with the response, then you're not listening. So you have to be humble. You have to be faithful enough to say, I'm secure in knowing that I'm not diminished as a human being because I might be wrong. In fact, I might become more human if I learn what I don't know.
Patty?
Yes.
I
We
see
have,
a lot of questions here.
yes. So there's Amy Lee.
Hang on, Patty.
Yes.
Before the first one, the Galaxy person had raised their hand. Let them go first, please.
Excellent. Okay.
All right.
And then
Galaxy J3, you can unmute.
Hi, how are you? My name is Adrian Bilal. My husband is a retired police officer. And I just want to address what Reverend Grayson was saying as far as the training. I agree with her 100% in reference to the baggage that officers bring with them from the product of their environment and what they have grown up with. But she also made a good point that the correctional officers don't go in with any guns, and they go in and they have to use their voice and I guess their empathy or whatever to de-escalate. Now, after 9/11, we all found out that a lot of our agencies, police departments, and every department was not working together in order to communicate with each other. So my question is the training for the regular police academy different from the training that the correctional officers get?
Yes, and the training is a little bit different because the training for the police departments are extended. Theirs is a little bit longer. Theirs is quite a bit longer than what corrections are, because we don't have to know as corrections officers, we don't have to do arrest, search, and seizure. So therefore, those type of things, as well as the different type of law citations and so forth and so on, we don't have to do that because we don't write those tickets and we don't have all of those codes and all that
Oh,
type
I get all that.
those type of trainings are different. But
yeah, but I think my point
training
is that you're learning a different technique to deal with the people that you have to, you know, protect or, you know, watch over in the jails. Whereas the police, that piece there should be into the police department, I mean, the police academy, to teach them how to de-escalate. But I'm gonna tell you, I, as a wife, we had to go to some of those psych classes that the officers were giving. And I came out of them and seen officers like shake their heads, like, you know, whatever they taught us, you know, they're not going to do it, because already they were all, you know, resistant to what they were told to do. Is basically, okay, now I'm a police officer and this is what I'm going to do. So with the training is that they have to be able to have ongoing training to understand the communities in which they are policing, so that they can better serve those people instead of coming in as that authoritative, you know, with their guns and everything like that. That's my comment.
Now on that, yes, we do have the same training. We do side handle baton training. We do have unarmed self, and they both of them all have unarmed self-defense. They both have IPC skills, interpersonal communication courses. They both have EEOC training and so forth and so on. We all have that. Now, and the reason why I know is because I used to teach them. So particularly side handle baton. So, and unarmed self-defense, all of those different things that we took in those classes, and we trained them and so forth and so on. Now, the key to it is the attitude.
Correct.
And that is the problem, because you said they came out of there with the intention, that with the thought, that the mindset that they are whatever, that's baloney, you're not going to use it. We as correction officers, we cannot come out of that training with that mindset, because we don't have that we don't have that side handle baton. We don't have that gun. We don't even have the side handle baton until it's time to put on riot gear. When it's time to break up some stuff, or when we're driving, when we're on the road, that's when we are locked and loaded as well with the, that's when we have our sidearms as well as our side handle batons and other things to be able to protect us. But other than that, so it's the whole mentality thing, is that we don't have the option. We don't have a choice, because if we want to be able to come home that night, and we want our fellow officers to be able to come home at night, we have to take those skills that we are learned and we are taught them just as intently as they are, but it's the mindset.
Correct. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It looks like, Kerwin, it looks like we have Amy Lee next, and then after that, Karen Brittingham, and then there's a couple more.
Right.
Do you see Amy Lee?
Amy Lee Downey?
I believe so.
Hi,
Yes.
can you
Yes.
hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, thanks for everyone for being here. My question is this, it seems at this point in history and time and racial justice feels different and very pregnant with potential to see change, actual change, more change. I'm not exactly sure which way to put it. But my question is, if you actually feel the same with that statement, can you point to why you think this time is different, or why it might bring about more change than it has in the past? For anyone who cares to respond.
I think my response to that would be, for me personally, at least with what I'm seeing on social media with other young people, is we're trying to get out of this idea of doing things just because they're trendy or they're cool or everybody else is doing them. People are still posting to go out and vote for your mail-in ballots. People are still posting petitions. People are still posting the protests, even though they are not being reported by the media anymore. And I think that kind of also speaks to what the media is saying about the protests, because as soon as the looting and the violence stop, they stop putting them on their platforms. But we are still out there protesting. We're still out there with our signs. So I think there's more of a resilience this time around with the protests and the Black Lives Matter movement that wasn't there before. I think people are really pushing for change. I think a lot of people, especially young people, are fed up with what's going on. And being, you know, part of the movement that is dying and not staying consistent and continuous. So I think that the difference between now and past movements is that this is not just a trend. This is not just something we're doing because it's cool. People are actually dying. People are actually being killed by the police, people who are sworn to protect us. And I think this time around, we're really looking for a difference. And that's definitely going to come with voting, signing petitions, putting people in power that have your shared interests and values and principles in regards to how to run a society that protects all people, not just white people. So I think the biggest difference is that people are not doing this and becoming a part of this because it's trendy. I think people are doing this because they genuinely want to see change and be a part of change.
Can I make a comment? To piggyback on what Subi said, and I agree. And Amy, you said something, you know, do you feel that there is a change? I do. And what I feel and what I see right now with the younger people is that they have more on their plate that they have to manage. They are concerned about the killing of black people. They absolutely are, and I love their commitment. But also on their plate, they're dealing with gun issues, the NRA. They are dealing with women's issues that are very, very focused on and very narrow. And they are out there really kind of fighting a lot of battles very intelligently. They are using the tools that they have, and thank goodness for technology, because I don't ever want to go back to a rotary phone. All right, so they have those skills. They are using those skills, and I'm just trying to figure out, should I invest another $1,000 to get a better phone so I can hang in there with them? But it is different now. And what I see with young people is that they are so multifaceted, and they are managing and they are multitasking at a level that, with organizational skills, which I give 2 thumbs up on for that, on that. They're doing it. They're challenged, and sometimes for me, I just kind of have to sit back and just wait and hear what they have to say. Yeah, I can jump in there with a comment, but it's a seasoned comment. It's a comment from another generation. It's a comment. It has the same feeling and emotion, but I feel for me, I have to kind of sit and watch. I have to sit and be there, be supportive. But I'm overwhelmed and amazed at the level that they're dealing with so many issues, and they're managing them really well. That's my opinion.
Patty, there's a lot of different questions. One of the questions was regarding the Amistad, what we could do as far as making sure that New Jersey schools.
I'm trying to take the questions in order.
Okay.
That one was after Karen Brittingham. Edmund had something to say. There's a few back and forth comments. Karen, do you want to?
I felt a little, can you hear me okay?
No.
Speak a little higher.
Hi, my name is Karen, and
That's good.
I'm so glad to be here. It's really nice to see everyone talking on this very important subject matter that's been going on for so long. I was a little concerned in regards to, and I need clarification in regards to a statement that was made in regards to being more human. Was Mr. Klein referring to the uprising of people really sharing their concerns about these murders that have been going on for so long? Or what was it to be better humans by? And by what standard is he referring to?
Karen, I appreciate you asking for the clarification. I wasn't making reference to those killings, but I will specifically. We have devalued human life. And when you are in a position of power, which white America is, it's much easier to devalue every other life. So if you want to heal any problem in society, you have to be able to look into everybody's eyes and see God staring back. And if you're not willing to do that, then you have dehumanized someone else. And so we live in a meritocracy where people in power have decided that other lives are cheap and matter less. And that's inhumane, that's evil, if I may. And that's the problem with the power-based situation. So, you know, for me, and everything I'm doing right now says, if we want to fix what's going wrong in this world, we have to go back to the very beginning and realize we're all made from the very same stuff. And the moment that I say my stuff is better than your stuff, I've committed a travesty on humanity, and I would argue a travesty against God. So it's, if there's anybody acting inhumane, I would argue it's people who are keeping power at the expense of everyone else. And to the original question right before you, though, which I think also answers a piece of your concern, I see a white power base who is responding in even more horrific ways. And, you know, we know historically that when you cage somebody or you back them into a corner, they come out even more violent. And so what you're getting out of this administration are things and policies, words that even their own supporters now can't support. So when you ask me how I can see that there's a difference, that this one is got more staying power, that this one is going to have more impact, I'm looking at the response from the people who feel that their power is being threatened, and how much more violent they're becoming and how ugly they're becoming.
Can I dovetail on that, please?
Yeah.
Okay, because, you know, there's an old saying, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. Now,
right.
And from what I know about history is that there were certain laws that were supposed to be enforced that never got enforced.
Correct.
As these laws are enforced, no matter how big the issue of bias or racism is, because its foundation is just wrong. As long as we, the people, stand up and confront them on the truth, it doesn't matter how mad they get, okay? Because that's what our ancestors knew. They were enslaved. They went in there and fought in wars. They knew that at one point, you really have to stand on the truth for all that it is, and not to play the fear game or to play the, well, let me be the good Negro and be quiet, you know, as the children watch Black men, women, and children mowed down. There's two issues, you know, with racism. This, you know, it is a psychological issue. It's ingrained in many people. And so the spiritual aspect is not going to work for them. It will only work through law enforcement and through different trainings, and then selecting people who can really handle those jobs, and not people who have a long-term issue of having hatred towards citizens who by happenstance to be Black. And I really speak more on Black issues because this is a long-term issue. But the laws are on the books. It's just a matter of us getting together and making sure it gets enforced without shutting, you know, each other's down, trying to, you know, minimize or trivialize the situation, because that's how it comes off to me. And I'm just one of many single grandmothers out there with, you know, children, grandchildren, and I'm concerned about the future. So that was my opinion on it, and I thank you for letting me share.
Karen, let me go further with that. It's not 401 years in America. We're talking about the eternity. That racism goes back premillennial. We know that
Genesis, Miriam didn't like Abraham's wife. We know this.
Right. Aaron and Moses spoke against Moses's wife, an Ethiopian.
God made his sister white.
You know, Jesus was most likely either African or Middle Eastern, and yet depictions from the 3rd century forward is he's all white. So racism is so pervasive that it changed the race of God in Christianity. And so, you know, if you've ever been to Nazareth, to the Church of the Annunciation, one of the things I dearly, dearly love, and I'm not a Christian, I'm Jewish. What I dearly love about that church is the walls that surround the church. Mary is in every different race that exists in America, in the world. All meaning that, you know, she represents all of humanity, not the European that was inherited as Christianity took hold in the Roman Empire. So this is a problem that's not an American problem. It's a problem that has been pervasive throughout history, where there's been a white power base that, like I said, has changed what God is supposed to look like, even in a Christian context. And in the Bible, racism exists there. So you're right. Well, I'll disagree with you on one piece. I don't think you can legislate this. I don't think you can legislate against hate. I think there are laws on the books and we do need to enforce them, but enforced laws are not going to change the hearts. We have to come back to a place where if we are going to pray to God for peace and for well-being, then we damn well better do what we're supposed to do to act on it.
Thank you. We have a couple more people with questions. Amy Van Doon has a question about the Amistad Law. Are you able to unmute, Amy?
Yep, I'm looking to find her. Saw you.
A-I-M-E-E. She spells her name.
Yep, got it.
Okay.
Hi, Amy.
Hi. So as a white woman, I'm trying to figure out what I can do. One of the things I want to do is go to my local school board and try to get more African American history. But do I need to bring them a curriculum? Or how, you know, where do I start? What do I do? Does anyone have any advice?
Amy.
You know, Gilda Rogers is a minor expert on this. Do we want to ask her to answer, or does somebody on the panel have an answer? I'm sorry, I don't want to skip you guys.
So there's a couple of things. Like you said, Gilda and the Citizens for Diverse and Open Society, they are doing some work there. I asked the same question to Brigitte Mondesir, and I think she probably would like to ask a question later on. But Amy, we can try to pull some things together so that you can have some stuff. Ideally, that wouldn't be necessary, but just in case it is, there have been conversations about getting some of that stuff so that I don't have the curriculum can't be an excuse.
And I would just add that the stuff starts with a list of readings. You know, before the curriculum, you've got to have the references. So I would say the beginning point, if we can start looking at, because, you know, somebody that's developing curriculum has to start from the books that are available to them. Those are the things that need to change. My son doesn't need to see the history books that I had in my period when I was 16.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Gilda wants to touch on that. Go ahead, Gilda, unmute.
She's still muted, Kerwin.
Just very quickly, we are ending the program at 8:30. So in about 5 minutes, we're going to do our wrap up. And also Linda plans to send a follow-up email to everybody that's on the call with and people are posting things about Amistad as well if you're reading your chats. Go ahead, Gilda.
I just wanted to say that the Amistad legislation came down in 2002 by State Assemblyman William Payne. So all the school districts are aware of the Amistad legislation. This is not something new, all right? But if you're not engaged with your local schools to see, are they teaching the curriculum? Because the Amistad the Amistad Commission itself has a curriculum
Yep.
It has a curriculum. This is not a secret. So we seem to think that, my issue is that many white teachers are not equipped to teach African American studies or history, all right? And now I'm not saying it's all white teachers can't teach it. I know white teachers that do teach it, all right? But for the most part, if they're not proficient in the history themselves, then how can they deliver it effectively to their students? So it seems to me that our teachers that are coming up in the ranks now, they need some different kind of training than they've been given in college and their student teaching experience, so that they become more abreast and aboard of about what this history is about and how it ties into, the bigger history of American history. So until we go before our school boards and have this discussion with them, what kind of trainings, what kind of professional development are our teachers receiving so that they can be more acclimated in this history and deliver it in a way that they're comfortable and it's meaningful and the students can digest it in the way that they will get something out of it. And on that note, I would just want to end and say, for all of you who are listening to me, the Two River Theater and T. Thomas Fortune Cultural Center, we're having a teachers training this summer. This will be our third one, our Summer Teachers Training Institute, that will take place August 5th. We're trying to do it as a hybrid. Maybe some people can join us on Zoom and maybe some will be with us at the theater who feels comfortable. We're trying to see if we can do it outside. That hasn't been totally worked out yet, but I would say go to Two River Theater's website, and if you have teachers that you want to share this with, I would appreciate it if you do that, and then they can get this information that we will. Dr. Grayson, our historian and president at the T. Thomas Fortune Cultural Center, will be one of the presenters, as well as Taylor Barfield, who is the literary manager at Two River Theater, and I will be there, and Kate Cadaro. So that's a start. So that's all I have to say. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Gil.
I just want to say that I'm not the same Dr. Grayson.
Right.
Walter Grayson. Dr. Walter Grayson.
There's too many of you. Do we have time for one more question, Linda, before we wrap up?
One more. We also have to do action items as well. So.
Well,
I think we're sort of doing some of that.
Yeah, I think so. But we have one more question, and then maybe we should have Mamone do her her power suggestions to bring home. So we have Anne Kelterborn has a question about segregated schools. So do you find her?
I see her. She's on the third group, the third level, number 3 from the left.
Okay. And try to unmute yourself.
Yep.
She did.
Am I heard?
Yes.
You're good.
All right, great. Gilda, I love some of the points that you're making there. I think that's so important. I think the first thing for us to start with, as an educator myself, is doing that level of interrogation of our practices, from the texts that we include to not making Black history something that we only teach for 1 month. It's a part of everything we teach. But I think teachers need, specifically field dominated by white women, we have to do some serious reflection on our practices. But one of the things that I guess I think a lot about is that idea of my own children learning with a diverse group of kids. Like that's the biggest way we're going to address this. And I really struggle living in a community that not only has very elitist private schools, but that's parents' choice to pay for that, but also a charter school where the demographics don't necessarily reflect the demographics of our public school, both economically and racially. And I'm struggling with living in this community with this, and I just was curious about what the panel has to say about how can we as a community interrogate the ways in which, I mean, it's great that we all go to the protest, but then our children all go back to separate schools, and there's an irony there, and I don't know how to live with it.
Great question.
So I'll say this, and I hope I'm not speaking out of school here, but only part of the socialization that children get comes from schools. We know that it's going to be extremely difficult to integrate schools. We've been trying to do it for 100 years? The thing I think that we have to do is not just integrate schools, but integrate communities, right? And so for some people, that means having to go outside of their comfort zone, outside of what they do, and intentionally try to show diversity, to show difference. And I think that there are enough people in each community that are willing to do something like that, and it could start something, right? I, for one, am appalled with the educational system in this country, and I know that it was designed on white supremacist ideology, and so it's working the exact way it's supposed to, right? So until we build something different where it is intentional and diverse and tailored to the child, not to a company's profit, then we will have to do these Band-Aid type things. But I think being intentional about exposing your children to difference and diversity, whether it's through museums or other educational outings, that's a way that I think we can work at it while at the same time we're trying to do the same thing for our schools. Integrate the communities first, like build a community outside of your normal community that takes into account diversity. And then our children, the relationships will carry them back into their communities.
And I also want to touch on that, especially coming from a youth perspective with integrating the school systems. I mean, a couple of years back, the charter school in this very town tried to integrate with the Red Bank Middle School, and that didn't happen. And I think a big issue of that was this fear of white kids going to school with other Black and minority kids. And I think that fear is stemming from the parents more so the students themselves, because racism is something that's taught. You're not born racist. So I think integrating the schools is really a big deal, because coming from a student perspective, in the charter school, I was one of 4 other African-American students in the entire class for up until kindergarten to 8th grade. And that does have an effect on how you see yourself and how you perceive yourself. And then the same thing happened at RBR. It's a predominantly white school. They're working on trying to integrate it more. But I think that integration is really important, and teaching Black history beyond slavery is really important, because again, it's about representation. You cannot do what you cannot see, and you cannot dream what you're not seeing in your own life. And I think that directly correlates to school, because you spend the majority of your life as a student in school, the more so than you spend it with your own family. So I think it has a really big influence on how you see yourself, how you interact with others who look like you, and how you are really going to make your own mark and change within this world. And I think that personally for me, if I had learned more of my history at a younger age, this empowered woman that you see today would have happened a lot sooner than when it did. And I think that if a lot of people had that opportunity at a younger age, we would see a lot more opportunities for Black people in roles where we can really be in positions to change. So it really does start with schools and integrating the school systems, but it's also with the parents. You cannot have children going to a school learning about diverse things and then all of that being completely reversed when they go home. It has to be one and the same. They have to be working together. And if that relationship can be strengthened and clearly defined, I think that's going to be a really big step in making the changes that we want to see, school system wise, racially wise, and just in society itself.
Thank you so
just
much.
to that point, Suvi, 2 years ago, the 8th graders from Little Silver and Shrewsbury had a party at the end of the 8th grade year to prepare for high school, going to RBR, and they didn't invite the Red Bank kids.
Yeah.
And they didn't have a problem with that.
And I think that's a big issue. And I think that there is a serious stereotype with the students that go to Red Bank Middle School versus the students that go to the charter school. I mean, there's a clear difference in demographic of the students that you're seeing. And I think another important conversation to have regarding the school systems is how the school systems can be a feeder program directly to the prison systems. When African American and Black kids are kicked out of school, when they're suspended, that is setting them up for failure later on in life. That's setting them up to be part of the system. That's setting them up to be involved in prison life. That's setting them up to not become a productive and a conscious citizen in this society. And I think that that's a huge issue that no one's really talking about, because I know in my own class, just based off of, fighting and incidents in our schools, they wiped out a lot of the Black kids. And I think that a big issue with that is, rather than kicking out and suspending, it's to have a conversation. It's to work on peer mediation and reformative justice within the school system, so that it doesn't have to go to the prison systems and the justice system. It can start in school, having a conversation, working with young people, so that it doesn't extend to that level. And I think that if we can do that, we would see a huge decline in the minority population within the prison systems, because it really does start in school. That's your first interaction with other people, with society, and who you're going to be in society starts at school. So that's what I would say in regards to that.
Thank you so much. We actually have reached 8:30, but we want Mamone to share her list of suggestions that we can take away with us from this wonderful meeting. Look at your chat box. Kerwin has sent a message to everyone who would like to join a working group for different projects. Let's see what we can do. Go ahead, Mamone.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, my name is Mamone Payton Christian, and I am a Red Bank resident. I'm the former Director of Parks and Recreation for the Borough of Red Bank. I'm the former President of the Board of Trustees. I'm born and raised in Fairhaven. I'm the daughter of a 37-year law enforcement officer. I'm also the graduate of Red Bank Catholic and the historically Black college, Howard University in Washington, D.C. I'm most proud of being the wife and mother of 3 dynamic Red Bank children: Miles, 19, Taylor, 18, Matthew's 13. And I just have a few things that I want to point out that we can do to make differences in everyday racism and systemic racism that we see within our community.
Mm-hmm.
The George Floyd murder sparked an outcry in the country, in which race has become a focal point and has opened the eyes of many. What you saw when he was murdered was the most final horrendous act of racism. However, let's start asking what happened that led us up to that point. And let's put a stop to some of those things before it gets to the point of no return. So I ask all non-Black and brown white people who don't like what they see to put on a different pair of glasses that may allow you and others to see situations, smaller situations, from a different perspective. One in which you can see racism in everyday life, in the workplace, in housing, in education, in recreation, in medicine, in everything that we do. My biggest takeaway in me giving you my history of where I was raised was that I have many wonderful white friends, many of whom I love dearly and would do anything for. And many of them just never saw racism towards Black people, even when it was smacking them in the face. They would call it anything other than what it really was. So here are some tools to see, identify, and to begin fighting everyday racism. First, acknowledge that white privilege does exist. Acknowledgement is a very powerful tool in fighting racism. Open your mouth. When you see something, say something. Don't be afraid to use your power. You have a lot of power. Use it for good. Use your resources. Spread the word whenever you can. Shine the light to cast out the dark. And here's a few examples of what some of that can look like. File a complaint on behalf of a Black person who you see being mistreated, not just by police, but teachers, doctors, employers, businesses. It's everywhere. Lobby your schools to teach about Black history. Lobby your schools to employ Black teachers so all children can get a more well-rounded and diverse education. Videotape or record anything that you see that might be questionable, just to let the offending parties know that it's not okay and that other people are watching. When you hear a racist comment, challenge it, even if it's someone you respect or admire. And you can challenge people in non-confrontational ways. Kiss them on the cheek. Start small at first. Honey, you know that's not right. I don't want to hear you talk like that. I don't want us to be one of those people. Start from there and work your way up to more of a discussion. And women, use your womanly ways to influence your home. The man is the head of the household, but women are the neck and can often move that head any way she chooses. So don't be afraid to make moves. Even gentle moves is a good start. So can you imagine how many family and friends you can influence by those methods alone? Challenge their way of thinking. So I'm just asking you to be more aware. Don't push things aside and act when you realize what it is that you see. Educate yourself about the topics. Talk to Black people, talk to white people, and ask the tough questions. Read books that will help you learn and make changes. A few are Rashma Menakem's book, My Grandmother's Hands. It's written by a trauma therapist to address systemic racism through working on recognizing, acknowledging, and changing our bias. A book, How to Be Anti-Racist, by Ibrahim Kendi. Read Ta-Nehisi Coates' article, The Case for Reparations. The US has already participated in reparations 4 times. Read about it. And I would say read The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. Better yet, get a group of friends together to discuss it. Have a book club. Read, then discuss. I would learn terms such as white fragility, white privilege, and don't take offense to what you're seeing or hearing. Look at the definitions and see if you can identify with any of the things that you see. And if you wish to make a change, make a change. Listen when Black people tell you that they are being discriminated. Please believe them. You're in a position to do something. Feel empowered and do it. Economic support. At the end of the day, racism affects Black people the most economically. So you can make a donation to fight against racism, organizations that fight against racism. You can support Black businesses, find them, Google them, and support them. You can professionally mentor a young adult, a colleague, a subordinate. You can open the door for a Black person to have an opportunity, particularly in the work area where you don't see many people of color. And I'm not just talking about entry-level jobs such as fast food workers or working as a Department of Public Works, but professional jobs as well. Wall Street, banking, information technology, accounting, insurance, marketing. My husband was always, and is still always, one of the only African-American people wherever he works in the industry that he works in. And there are many qualified African-American men who are competent and capable to work in those industries. I would say, find your city or your town's policies, such as, do the police departments use body cameras? Do they use no-knock warrants? And go to your council members and your city representatives and lobby on behalf of the right thing. Have small groups in your home and invite or hire people who are willing to speak openly and have honest conversations and learn. And finally, just do the work. Don't let this be a moment that will fade away. Let change come from this period in time. Be on the right side of history. Racism is a learned behavior. White privilege is a learned existence. Just as it was learned, it can be unlearned. Commit to unlearning systemic behaviors. Thank you so much for listening and participating in such an important conversation. And I have much love for you. Thank you.
Thanks, Ramon.
Thank you, Ramon. That was fantastic. Thank you, everybody. Linda, what's the date of the next program?
It is the last Wednesday. I just put it in the chat in July, which is July the 29th at 7 p.m. And our guest will be Itzel Perez, who is very much an activist in the Latino community, and she'll be talking about things that the Latino community are going through right now, and DACA, as well as health disparities and how the Red Bank community particularly is doing during this virus and this time.
Wonderful.
So thank you so much, everyone, for participating. I hope that you found this to be beneficial. I hope that you're taking some good action items away with you. And I hope that you'll join us as we move forward to do more programming and more things to better the Red Bank area community.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Good night.
Thanks for the panelists and everybody who came.
Thanks to everyone.